So, as you guys may or may not be, probably not, well, maybe, because I consider most of my audience at this point to be friends, maybe a couple family members, but I'm a pretty big baseball fan. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and I am a Seattle sports fan, but a Seattle Mariners fan, and so a lot of depression if I allow that to my team's success to be an indicator of that. The Cleveland Indians have long had a caricature, a racially based caricature. I mean, even just starting with the name Indians being kind of embarrassingly inaccurate, but the logo that they've had, Chief Wahoo, is a sort of, he's got big teeth and just kind of exaggerated, red-faced, just what would widely be considered as sort of an offensive caricature of Native Americans. Well, this year, the Cleveland Indians are beginning to withdraw that and kind of do away with the logo, instead opting for a Block C logo. I'll just read the statement from MLB that I'm drawing from an ESPN article. Major League Baseball is committed to building a culture of diversity and inclusion throughout the game. Commissioner Manfred said in a statement, over the past year, we encouraged dialogue with the Indians organization about the club's use of the Chief Wahoo logo. During our constructive conversations, Paul Dolan, who is the Indians owner, I believe, made clear that there are fans who have long-standing attachment to the logo and its place in the history of the team. Nonetheless, the club ultimately agreed with my position that the logo is no longer appropriate for on-field use in Major League Baseball. And I appreciate Mr. Dolan's acknowledgement that removing it from the on-field uniform by the start of the 2019 season is the right course. So we kind of learned there that it's more the 2019 season that they are doing away with it, and they're just sort of phasing it out. But kind of personally, my initial take is that if this is causing distress for you, then you probably have a decent life. But just a couple of thoughts. I mean, this can sort of delve, and I'm sure in the crevices and the caverns of AM talk radio, sports talk radio, there are a lot of offended white dudes out there that are just not going to have this. But I'll just kind of approach this from a sociological perspective, a social science perspective. Kind of think a couple of terms come to mind. One is cultural appropriation. This is kind of a textbook application. Having a sports team with a logo that is just obviously exaggerating and caricaturing sort of Native American culture in this very sort of shallow and just this sort of inaccurate white man's perception of some kind of unruly character. Cultural appropriation is a concept dealing kind of with the adoption of elements of a minority culture by members of the dominant sort of majority culture. So it's kind of a function of colonialism, of the power in charge, sort of using elements of that just because they can, because they are on the other side of the imbalance of power, and they can sort of just appropriate that in ways that are sort of stealing from the heritage of the minority culture being appropriated, and just kind of borrowing whatever sort of symbol or cultural element or ritual or practice for kind of generating or or colonializing and creating your own sort of thing without any reference, or it's kind of like cultural plagiarism. So that's the obvious thing that kind of comes to mind, and that's a textbook example. But then we also kind of get to our sponsor for the day, the symbolic interactionism perspective in sociology, that we construct a sense of meaning and understand the world around us through shared experiences of symbols and language. Meanings are formed based on social interactions. So for proponents of this logo, fans against the change, the meaning of the Chief Wahoo logo is developed based on childhood memories of teams they enjoyed watching, a sense of community, everyone in your life treating that logo in such a high esteem and regard, and there's fun involved, and then there's a sort of protective element of anyone who complains about it as just being whiny, PC, liberal, whatever. It's likely that this sort of perspective is developed without, as we have sort of oftentimes we follow the same circles, and it's unlikely that a lot of Native American people are kind of involved in this sort of formulation of this perspective. So that's kind of why people just sort of grow up with it, and they look at it as it's not a big deal. It's just fun. It's just baseball. But then you get to a broader societal and American history perspective, and we want to sort of add layers of perspective and understanding as we look at this, or at least if you are watching or listening to this podcast, that's what the goal is. And so you can't touch if you kind of look at it from that broader perspective, you can't touch any aspect, any grain of dirt or sand or rock or part of land that isn't connected with colonialism, that wasn't affected by the past, of the violence of manifest destiny, of the attitude of empire expansion. If you grew up, if you grew up in an average American life, you think, well, most people that I know are pretty nice. Baseball's fun. The Cleveland Indians are fun. The 95 team was really good. The 2016 team was really good, but not better than the Cubs. But so this image is about all that stuff, and not what's in the past, is kind of the thought process there. And on the other hand, with that history kind of being said, if you're native born, or if you're experiencing even empathy for some of these realities in the sort of violent, genocidal, colonial, tame the inferior savages attitudes that led to this nation state existing and becoming the most powerful and wealthy military empire on the planet, that's just, if we're being honest, that's what happened. And maybe you sort of learned in school differently, whether you had a private education that, or even a public education. This is played down a lot because America's awesome, and so to kind of have all this, and then so to not learn about it, kind of can skew your perspective. But if you have empathy, the meaning, and you have this knowledge, the meaning that you develop around the Chief Wahoo logo, you start to see the big tooth, the red face, the caricature, the exaggerated features, and you start to realize and understand that this is a continued extension of that legacy of violence. And as you sort of realize that, minds change and public opinions change. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's the positive here. That's the thing to be celebrated. It's not about ruining everyone's fun, or ruining your childhood, or piling on guilt for you, personal guilt. That's not what this is about. It's about empathy. And so as we sort of realize that, we can create a society, or we can at least move towards a society that acknowledges and is honest with its past, is acknowledging and is honest with some of the bad things we've done. And sure, maybe your parents did that more than you did. Maybe your grandparents or your great grandparents are more responsible as far as generationally speaking. And yeah, okay, but are you going to learn from that? Are you going to learn from this legacy? And are you going to take these lessons and apply them to the problems of today, of the imbalances and injustices of today, and do your small part in not maintaining the oppression of people? It's not really asking a lot to be sensitive of something that really is damaging or dehumanizing to someone else. That's the least we can do as people coming from, and I'm going to use a bad word here, coming from privilege.